So that's what we do is we try to create a space where Republicans can talk about solutions, ask questions about the science, and weigh in with their lawmakers to let them know that there is not a monolith of opposition to climate action.
I've mentioned this stat before, but it is worth repeating. The states with the most renewable energy are Texas, California, and Iowa. The top renewable states by percentage of their power use: Iowa, New Mexico, South Dakota, Kansas, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Texas. There's some really red states high on that list. So this doesn't have to be a red versus blue issue. That's the message of our guests today. This is Plugging In. I'm Barry Wygel. Welcome to Plugging In, powering our way to a brighter and healthier New York. I'm your host, Barry Wygel. Each episode on this podcast, we will discuss a different topic related to clean energy, explaining complex topics in a way you can understand. Become part of the community as we help to make a brighter and healthier New York.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier, tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in, the future of New York is here.
Joining us on this episode of the podcast is Chelsea Henderson. Chelsea is the Director of Editorial Content for RepublicEN.org, and she's also the host of the Eco Right Speaks podcast and the author of Glacial, the Inside Story of Climate Politics. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about the history of your organization.
For those who don't know, Bob Inglis, former congressman from South Carolina, he represented what he likes to call the most conservative district in the United States, or he did. And the early part of his career, he kind of went along with party line on climate change. And then a combination of elements, his own kids wanting him to, as he puts it, clean up his act on the environment, and some visits as a House Science Committee member that where he talked to scientists, saw the ice core, et cetera, convinced him that this was a real problem. And the voters of South Carolina rewarded him with expulsion. They voted for somebody else in the next cycle. So he was not to be emotionally defeated by this and decided to make creating a comfortable space for Republicans and conservatives to talk about climate change his mission. So he created RepublicEN.org. That's a project of the George Mason University 4C program. And so that's what we do is we try to create a space where Republicans can talk about solutions, ask questions about the science, and weigh in with their lawmakers to let them know that there is not a monolith of opposition to climate action.
Who are your members, or who are you creating this space for? Is it conservative citizens, voters, or is it the elected officials themselves? Is it a mix?
It's really the voters, right? It's citizens. Bob likes to say that if you have, 100 people who call your office or email your office and say, I care about XYZ bill or I care about XYZ issue, that is a number that is significant enough that it rises to the level of getting the members' attention. And so what we really want to create are, we don't lobby on any specific bill. We are a nonprofit, but we want to raise concerns about climate change, but also point people to, you might want to look at this bill. We're not saying go co-sponsor that bill or vote yes on that bill, but getting people to weigh in with their members of Congress. Maybe you want to ask them to look at the Prove It Act, or you want them to consider what the benefits of a carbon tax would be. So we try to bring this information to the people, hoping that at some point the people will convey that message to their lawmakers.
So no surprise or no secret that we're in a highly politicized time where consensus and crossing party lines is frowned upon, as unfortunate as that is. So how do you work with people that align with your values to tell their congresspeople or their elected officials to buck the trend or look for compromise or aisle crossing?
I mean, it takes political courage, right? It takes a lot of courage to go against what you perceive your tribe to be thinking. And I think, in a way, especially with Bob, because he comes with such rock solid conservative credentials, that for someone like him to say, hey, it's okay, like we need to be at the table discussing climate solutions, that it does give space. And one thing that he really likes to say is that conservatives are the most important people at the table on this issue. And if you have a piece of legislation and it has, let's say it's, a carbon tax, for example, and it has Republican co-sponsorship, it is much more likely to pass in a bipartisan way than a piece of legislation that just has Democratic co-sponsorship. That having Republican support on climate and clean energy policies makes that policy inherently more bipartisan, which makes it more durable. So, this climate change, the number of people who dismiss the science shrinks every year and is in the single digits now. So I think there's a wider acceptance that climate change is happening. Let the discussion be about the solutions.
So what do you think the motivation of people to join your group is? Is it coming from a fear of extreme weather? Is it recognizing the economic benefits of these policies? Is it something else?
I mean, both, all of the above. We hear personal anecdotes from people all the time. I didn't know a group like you existed. We actually have members too who are already, in the choir, so to speak, but maybe they have a skeptical family member or friend or colleague. And so they want us to help arm them with the right words to use or different arguments that might resonate, because I think it really is important to try to reach people in a way that lets them see this as a problem, right? So are you somebody who enjoyed ice fishing, with your uncle or whoever as a kid, and you can't ice fish on the lake anymore because it doesn't get cold enough? I always give that example because I'm from Maine, where everybody used to be obsessed with ice fishing. Are you somebody who has experienced a Category 5 hurricane and you had to leave your home? Are you trying to buy a home maybe in a state like California, Louisiana, or Florida, where the major home insurance companies are fleeing because it is too costly for them to insure homes? And home ownership, to me, is the cornerstone of the American dream. So if we're reaching a point where it is no longer economically viable to buy a home in certain areas, these are all huge signs and reasons why people come to us and say, thank God you're there. What can we do?
And how is it going? How has, your movement grown or shrank, or how has it been?
What we try to do at the beginning of each year is pick a few target states based on, do we have a good contact in the governor's office or in the federal leadership offices, the Senate or the House, and where we also know we have a level of volunteers who are extra active, I guess I would say, always wanting to write op-eds or write LTEs or make calls. So we kind of know where our membership is the loudest and where we could have opportunities to have events. Bob meets with Rotary Club members. He and I both do presentations to university programs. So really just trying to get that word out. And we are not the only eco-right group out there. Now we have a lot of other friends kind of in the trenches with us. But right now, things do feel a little harder with the current rhetoric, the current administration. So, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think our job got a lot harder, but that just means we have to work twice as hard.
How do you adjust to a hostile, quote unquote, hostile administration at the top? But there are still a lot of people trying to do good.
I really think it is a matter of especially making the economic case. So, the word tariffs is kind of like the new buzzword, right? We've been looking at carbon tariffs for a while as one way to compel international action. So, I worked on the Hill in the 2000s, and I remember at that time we had a lot of people saying, well, why should we act on climate when India and China and Brazil and, all these other economies weren't acting on climate? And obviously, the U.S. can only do what the U.S. can do. We can't force other countries to the table. We aren't even going to the table ourselves, right? We don't have a national climate program. But we do have a lot of manufacturing that is cleaner than other countries. And part of that is because of our environmental statutes. And so we shouldn't allow our markets to be flooded with products that are made cheaper because they don't have those same environmental standards. Put a tariff on those products, those countries eventually will say, we better up our game. I think there are some real opportunities. I mentioned home ownership and the home insurance crisis. I think especially as we hit another hurricane season, another round of wildfires, these are huge, costly events. And what we can't be scared of is, I know in the past there's been sometimes a reluctance to talk about the climate connections in the immediate aftermath because it's, opportunistic. But those are opportunities to have conversations and to connect dots that I think are really important.
Completely agree. Absolutely. So where or who is doing a good job, in your opinion, whether it's a state that's advocating good policy or even a country around the world?
Absent some of the federal leadership or federal opportunities, I do think that we'll see a shift focus back on states. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of states that recognize the economic advantages of clean energy. You have the top three solar states in the U.S. are California, which is no surprise, but Texas and Florida, two very red states. And the top three wind states are Texas and Iowa and Oklahoma, three very red states. So they understand in those states there is so much opportunity with clean energy. So I think that really helps. And then in November, you had 18 members of the House GOP write a letter to Speaker Johnson asking him to not just blanket repeal the Inflation Reduction Act because, 80% of those funds go to red districts. And so I think when we start to see that kind of momentum and those folks that are benefiting from the clean energy economy stand up and speak up, that will help us here at the federal level.
What advice do you have for Democrats, citizens that are trying to advocate for policies you agree with that are advocating to Republican elected officials?
Again, kind of making those economic arguments. People, whether they identify with a specific party or not, because I know sometimes I feel like people are like, well, I'm independent, or, I'm stepping back from party identity. If they consider themselves a little more conservative, talking to them, making sure that they're weighing in with their lawmakers and not being afraid to make that call, even if you think, oh, well, my lawmaker doesn't agree with me. Again, to what Bob is saying, we have to be raising our hands and standing up and making our position on climate change known to those lawmakers. I believe there's a sense of urgency, very personally, but I know that there are some Republican lawmakers who are turned off by sort of some of the alarmist, urgent talk. So maybe do a little research, kind of find out, do you have farming in your area? Do you have steel manufacturing? I think really connecting impacts on jobs, impacts on the economy of the area that the lawmaker is from is going to be the best way to make an argument. So that's what I would do.
Very good advice.
Listeners.
So how can people get involved?
Well, if they want to get involved with republicen.org, they can go to our website, which literally is in the name, RepublicEN. So not an A like Republican, but EN, and that E stands for Energy and Enterprise.org/join. And if you join us, it's a free membership. We are really big on sharing information. So every Friday, our membership base gets an email from me that summarizes the week's news. I have the best article to read this week, any events that we might be participating in or speaking at that you might want to tap into. We always include a link to our podcast, other media that we might be involved in or featured in. And we're really just trying to highlight that other right of center folks are doing stuff. So get involved. And I think that right now, one of the most satisfying things that you can do is be active in a way that feels meaningful. And I know people are thinking that the next 4 years are really a long haul. And so we have to kind of protect our peace, but also find our areas where we think we can have the greatest impact. So whether it's with us or some other organization, I think really getting involved in a way that taps into your skills is really going to be critical.
Yes. And tell me a little bit about your book.
Yeah, Glacial, the inside story of climate politics. I had somebody tell me the other day that they felt like it read like a thriller. Like every page was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I really just wanted to show that, for nearly 60 years, we have been trying to enact climate policy of some sort in this country, really starting with this briefing that LBJ got about this time, actually 60 years ago. So crazy,
Wow.
right? And, I think that one thing that gave me hope was just seeing how bipartisan this issue was, especially in the 70s and the 80s. Things kind of dipped a little bit in the 90s. Bob calls the 2010s the decade of disastrous disputation, when really disputing climate science kind of had its heyday. But there were so many opportunities for cooperation, and I really tried to highlight in the book, and also show some of the unsung heroes that have worked tirelessly on climate change over the years. So any listener that gets a copy, reach out to me. I'll figure out a way to sign it for you or send you a book plate that you can post in the front of it so you have my signature. I wrote it, so obviously I like it. But I really wanted to write it so that you don't have to be a policy wonk to understand it. I wanted, my dad, who doesn't read legislative text, to be able to read it and understand and get the nuances.
Yeah, congratulations on that. That's awesome. We'll get a copy for our office and we can pass it around.
Yeah.
And I'll end just on, hopefully this will be an optimistic answer, but we'll see.
Sure.
But you mentioned the bipartisanship, history of climate politics. Do you think in the age of social media, we can get back there, whether it's short term or even long term?
Yeah, we have to. We really have to, right? If you look at the Senate, you need 60 votes to pass anything. And so you need some bipartisan cooperation. And, this isn't going to be as optimistic as I think you were hoping for. I do think there will need to be some kind of big event, like something that happens that brings us together, kind of like a 9/11 for climate change, where is it a Category 6 hurricane? Is it? And I hate for that to be what brings us together.
Right.
But we're really good as Americans at responding in a crisis. So, there's that opportunity. But I also just think what really gives me hope is that when you look at the number of people who actually accept the science of climate change, and especially the younger generations, my kids are 21 and 23. They've been learning about it since, at an age-appropriate way since they started school. And so you have generations now who have been learning about this issue since they were young kids. And some of those folks are becoming voters now. So I think that there is real potential. The people want it, and now we just need to convince the lawmakers that it's okay for them to lead.
Yeah, Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Plugging In. I hope you learned something, and I hope you share this knowledge with someone else. It would be incredibly helpful if you leave us a 5-star review wherever you found this podcast. If there's a topic you would like us to cover in the future, or have a question about clean energy, send us an email at podcast@aceny.org. You can follow us on social media using the links in the show notes, or consider joining our Clean Energy Supporters mailing list at aceny.org/support. Your support is crucial to creating a brighter and healthier New York. I'll see you next time.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier, tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in